To the people who live here, this is Liverpool 8. To the rest of us, it's Toxteth. The name alone evokes images of conflict in the minds of people living outside this ghetto. This is the story of the people who live inside it.
You wonder why we uprise, politically unstabilised, economically destabilised, people dehumanised, youth criminalised, mentally vandalised, housing ghettoised, politically unrecognised, and you wonder why we uprise.
Leroy Cooper is the self-appointed poet of Liverpool 8. 4 years ago, he was involved in a fight with police, a fight which sparked off the huge riots of 1981.
We're the first generation after our mother and fathers came here from Jamaica or the West Indies or Africa, and they came with a different idea, a different attitude. And I wasn't even born here, but I've been brought up here like 23 years of my life, and I've been educated in British schools. And my outlook on life is a bit different from my parents. I won't accept some of the grin and bear it attitudes of older generations before. And I know I speak for people, other young people as well.
Getting ready to talk about the ghetto right from here.
Granby Street is the jugular vein running through the centre of the Liverpool 8 ghetto. The life of the area's mainly black population of 20,000 revolves around Granby's shops, cafes and takeaways. It also has a less enviable reputation. In this autumn's riots, it was once again in the front line of clashes with the police. How then do the locals explain the ghetto?
Basically, what you would call a ghetto, in inverted commas, is something which is created as a product of a racist society and a racist system. So it's really saying to blacks, you stay there, don't step out, don't come into town where there are nice white people and we've got our nice shops and so on. Even if you riot, stay in there.
As you might expect in an isolated society like Liverpool 8, group leaders tend to emerge. Delroy Burris is a self-employed builder. Although he rejects the title of community leader, he is in fact a counsellor to the younger, less mature men in the Granby area. He's fit, wiry, intelligent and articulate. His nature is mercurial. When he talks about the police, he seems to find it hard to contain his temper.
This community has gone through too much racial harassment in this society, even as black British, too much economic deprivation. And now, in 85, our youth have become politically aware. They fought in 81 on the streets and beat the enemy, which was the police front, because they were there to oppress the black community. I mean, you see pictures on South Africa, the way the police used to go in and work it to the black people, you know, with whips and everything. Let me tell you, before 81, the scene wasn't much different in Liverpool 8.
If Delroy Burris is occasionally hot-headed, then the Mr. Cool of Liverpool 8 has to be Micheal Showers. His life hasn't been entirely blameless, but he's well respected in the area, and most days you'll find him on Granby Street giving advice, asking questions.
Hi, Sal. What happened about the house?
Problem got no way. We gotta go away.
Unofficially, police describe Micheal Showers as the godfather of Liverpool 8. It's certainly true that he has real influence, as well as enjoying good clothes, food and wine. At the same time, he clearly cares about what he calls his people, particularly the youngsters. He too has few words of comfort for the police.
I think they've created so many scars on the minds of the youth of Liverpool 8, black and white, that the best thing that they can ever hope for is to be able to walk along Granby Street and be ignored, because the strength of the youth in Liverpool 8 is far stronger, I think, than the youth of, say, Brixton, Handsworth and other places, because I don't think you'll ever get a situation where you'll see the youth of Granby having football matches and so forth with the police.
In the Liverpool riots of 1981, it was the police who suffered the worst scars. Undertrained and poorly equipped, 700 officers needed hospital treatment. Some were so badly hurt that they haven't worked since. Officers involved then predicted that one day a policeman would be killed and vowed they wouldn't take that sort of beating again. In this autumn's riots, the violence in Toxteth wasn't as bad as in 1981 or in outbreaks elsewhere. But in Tottenham, of course, a police officer was stabbed to death.
England's probably, say, 10 or 15 years behind America, and like every day in America, policemen get shot and killed. It's no big thing, but it's a big thing here now in Britain. It's being attached to black people, you know what I mean? So we're being set up as the scapegoats, the real threats to the state, and these are the rebels. But how many black people have been killed by police in the last couple of months? How many black people have been killed by white imperialistic governments over the years? And now you're talking about one policeman now in your time. How many of my black people have been killed? Is anybody grieving for them? Only me and the black people here now who are still conscious of that legacy. You know what I mean? I'm not condoning what happened in Tottenham, but like, you know, what you do give out in life comes back to you.
The Granby Street area is different in many ways from other immigrant inner-city ghettos. Firstly, the black community's been settled here for several generations. What sometimes confuses outsiders even further is that many people here are of mixed race, but always called black.
Madam, thank you.
Whatever the colour, this seems to be a genuinely caring society with no internal racial tension.
We just look upon ourselves as individuals, running or working, whatever you want to say, in Granby, and trying to make a good living and living together. And I haven't found any difficulties whatsoever or any obstacles in my way.
Hello from Toxteth, say the cheery smiles. Hello from Toxteth, say the sparkling eyes. Come to dinner, come to tea. We're not cannibals, can you see? We're not muggers, can you see? We're not drug pushers, can you see? We're not rioters, can you see? We come from Toxteth, can you see? The daily papers, they lie daily, can you see? You can see. Come on, lad.
Education, or lack of it, we're constantly told, is one of the main causes of resentment among black youngsters. In Liverpool, about 9,000 children are being educated in rundown areas. The children who go to the Granby Street Primary School are comparatively lucky. The building is old, but the teachers are dedicated and the pupils disciplined and keen. Most of the black children here, though, won't achieve their potential. Education officials say that part of the reason is that many black youngsters and their parents expect to achieve less, and this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
A black child or black children and white children, they go to school together from Form 1, day 1. They leave school together. And as soon as they get to 17, 18, they part company. Why? The system has driven them apart.
Because of the system, the black community has created its own set of alternative agencies. For example, in houses once occupied by wealthy Liverpool merchants, they now have their own employment bureau. They feel they'll have no success in competing with the thousands of white unemployed on Merseyside.
Okay.
These people have been persuaded to apply for junior bank jobs paying £60 a week before tax. It's nothing new to them. They've each applied for 20 similar jobs before, without success. 90% of blacks in this area are unemployed, Yet it's unusual to see a black face working in one of the city centre stores in Liverpool. Because there's so much white unemployment in Liverpool, it's claimed that the much greater problems of the black community are brushed aside.
Yes.
I think it's very important that we champion the cause more effectively and positively, because I don't think white people who are in positions of power do take notice to the problems of black unemployment. And if we take, for instance, the City Council, the largest public employer and the largest employer on Merseyside, 31,000 people they employ, yet there's only 280-odd black people working for them. You take the County Council, 15,000 employees, less than 20 people, black people working for them. Liverpool Area Health Authority, 15,000 again, less than 300 to 400 black people there. We look at the private sector, 8 of the largest companies there, and you've got something like 3,000 or more people working there, and you've got less than 12 black people working within them.
In the same crumbling terrace, the Liverpool 8 Law Centre, set up after the riots of 4 years ago. It lives from hand to mouth on contributions from trusts and large companies. The staff here try to diffuse potential trouble by taking up legitimate complaints by members of the black community. The centre was founded with the help of the Bishop of Liverpool.
I can put it very simply that people who have felt so excluded from the life of this city, so that we know that there is no black barrister, black solicitor or solicitor's clerk in Liverpool, even though there's been a black community for well over 100 years. There's no black councillor. The notion that the law could be a friend is actually a very important point, and that people could begin to say, yes, we can use the law, peaceful means, to tackle issues about housing or employment or whatever may be.
Today, we are here in Granby to evangelize the people here, Father, because Granby Street is known by Liverpool, is known to all Liverpool that is a troubled area.
Most weeks, less orthodox clergymen find their way onto Granby Street. Members of the Brotherhood of the Cross and the Star often turn out to sing a simple, if repetitive, message. They believe, it seems, that Christ has already returned. Cynical passers-by remark that he hasn't been seen much on Granby Street lately. After his inquiry into the riots of 1981, Lord Scarman recommended that community policing should be introduced into areas like Liverpool 8. It meant that instead of touring the area insulated in patrol cars, officers would be on foot and usually in pairs. At the outset, most of the officers involved were volunteers, and early observers thought the scheme was working well. But now others say that community policing has helped to underline the boundaries of the ghetto.
Once you draw a line around an area, right, and they drew a line around what was basically the black area of Liverpool 8, and say, within this area we're going to introduce a form of community policing, right? And there's no attempt to introduce that outside that area. The danger is that you're really saying to black people, keep behind that line and you'll be all right. Step over that line and by George, you're going to get a different style of policing.
The community policing of Granby Street is handled by officers from the Hope Street station half a mile away.
695,
Even working in pairs, few people would swap jobs with them.
73 beat, 6672, 6988.
The officer on the right still carries a scar under his eye from an earlier riot. It's not a glamorous job.
Old 3:15 this morning, there was a robbery outside Jamaica House. 31-year-old male leaving the premises. attacked by 4 males. And as usual, complainant was intoxicated and uncooperative.
Some of these officers told us that even within the police force their role in Liverpool 8 is misunderstood. They're sneered at, it seems, for operating a soft policing policy in return for a quiet life. Some politicians have claimed that areas like Granby Street have become no-go areas for police. That's not true.
It's not a no-go area in our terms because we go in, it is policed at all times of the day and night. But we occasionally have to tread carefully, but certainly not a no-go area.
Sometimes there's hostility shown to police patrols, and quite often there's a lot of friendship shown. It's one of the situations that we've got in Liverpool 8 that sometimes you're going to get hostility, and it's something that we've got to react to sensitively. Really.
Within the Toxteth beat, there is a great deal of understanding of very careful and discreet policing, whereas it's good old-fashioned rough and tumble outside the ghetto. And this makes inside the ghetto look like a no-go area. If you are up to mischief, you nip back across the boundary into the ghetto because you think you'll be safe there. And I understand that quite a number of ill-doers use us quite deliberately that way. Now that gets the whole scam and scheme into discredit.
It is quite wrong if the impression is created that people are allowed to do things in Liverpool 8 that wouldn't be tolerated elsewhere. I would take this opportunity to caution them in chasing that simplistic interpretation. Absolutely not true.
What is true is that minor offences like having an untaxed car will probably be ignored. Cannabis, or ganja as it's called, is also possessed and smoked openly on Granby Street with impunity.
Yes, I know that marijuana has been smoked in there for many years, long before I ever came here anyway, or it's been used, let's put it that way. But I don't think it's been a particular problem insofar as we're concerned, except in 1 or 2 isolated incidents.
Does that mean that Liverpool 8 in certain matters is, if not a no-go area, a sort of blind eye area?
No, that same principle applies right across the county. We made this quite clear some 2 years ago. I think we were virtually in the vanguard of our new approach to dealing with soft drug abuse, as it were, that we felt it better to deal with it by way of advice rather than prosecution.
The writing on the wall is a message to outsiders. It means that while ganja, cannabis, is permitted by the community, heroin, or smack, certainly is not, and that offenders will be dealt with. No smack left means that no more heroin dealing will take place from this house in Toxteth. After keeping it under observation for several weeks, a small army of black youths, acting as vigilantes quite outside the law, raided the house and ordered the heroin dealers to leave. One dealer, himself black, who showed some reluctance to go, had his kneecaps broken with a hammer. By contrast, Delroy Burris's knees are in good shape. He is very well informed about that vigilante raid.
The vigilante raid, because heroin pushes were starting to sneak in to Liverpool 8, see, because Liverpool 8 is unique in the way the police are policing it. So because these elements are getting pressure outside of this area, they started to think it would be safer if they moved into Liverpool 8 to sell their poison. Now, this area has 5 schools, junior schools in it, so obviously that type of stuff's not going to be tolerated in this community. And so people for weeks had been monitoring the main dealers, observing who goes and who didn't go, and actually getting 1 or 2 junkies to actually score and bring it back to show them so they'd know that these people were the right people. Then they decided it was time to strike, and about 150 of them had met up on Granby Street, and they systematically attacked each house and drove the people out.
What did they do to the drug dealers?
One of them they eventually caught. He was hiding in his loft, and he denied any knowledge of it, but obviously the people who had raided his house had also observed previous nights people going there and scoring heroin. He was dragged out of the loft. I believe violence was applied to the person, and then he eventually took them, the vigilantes, to his main dealer, which was on Smithdown Road. They then had raided that house. There was a bit of a scuffle, I believe, and some people were hurt who were selling heroin, and they smashed up the flat and they left. And they did that systematically to another 2 houses.
And did you play any part at all in organising those vigilante raids?
No.
Liverpool's early wealth as a seaport was based on the inhuman triangle of the slave trade, bringing slaves from Africa, then onto the New World. It's claimed by the black community that this history has left racism ingrained in the fabric of the city.
It's not just Liverpool, it's the whole country built on black man's slavery. Black man's suffering built on social lies, and you wonder why we uprise. Worries and problems for the old slave town because they can't keep the black man down. They fought for freedom in 81, they fought to survive in 85. Worries and problems in the old slave town because they can't keep the black man down.
Because since January or thereabouts of this year, there's been an increase in the type of gratuitous violence which the officers suffer. And they're catcalled, they're spat at, they're followed by quite large groups of youths. And it's rather an untenable sort of a situation.
I think the one we can talk about is the stolen vehicle syndrome, where a car was stolen, it was driven into the area, and immediately the stolen car got in there and the police car followed it. The road was blocked off, and immediately at both ends, and the officers were stoned, the vehicle was stoned, and another car came up and rammed it. And we had in April of this year, we'd 4 officers quite badly injured by this tactic. Why, we just don't know.
As summer approached, police nightly reports noted more incidents known as tension indicators. July the 27th, early hours of the morning, 3 police officers drive into Toxteth to help a customs officer whose motorbike has been stolen. All 3 injured when attacked by a gang of over 50 black youths. No arrests. August the 2nd, midday, a car used in a jewellery raid is driven into Toxteth. A police car in pursuit is badly stoned by black youths. The police car is ordered to abandon the chase. No arrests. August the 10th, a local Toxteth carnival invaded by black youths from Brixton develops into a fight in which knives are used. 1 black youth from London dies in hospital. This time there was an arrest in the early morning. Although no one realised it at the time, the fuse for the October riot had been lit.
Well, it's 7 o'clock in the morning when, you know, the bang on the door. And when I looked out the bathroom window and shouted, "Who was it?" They said, "Open the fucking door and find out." I came down the stairs, and when I opened the door, there was two uniformed policemen, and they just, you know, moved aside, and this big fella, plain clothes, asked for the people that lived here before. When I said you know, don't live here, he said, "Well, what's your name?" When I said Nichols, he said, "Right," he said, "We want your son, Stephen."
Stephen Nichols had indeed been at the carnival and had a fresh cut on his left cheek. After his arrest, he was taken to the Admiral Street police station near Toxteth.
This is Tony Kerner with Radio City News. About 150 people began to gather outside the Admiral Street station after the arrest of a man...
The word flashed around the community that Nichols had been unjustly arrested and was being mishandled at the police station. Between 150 and 200 men, mainly black, laid virtual siege to the station for several hours. Delroy Burris was there.
Well, what exactly were these 200 or so people doing? What were they shouting and doing?
Release him. Why aren't you arresting people from London? Why aren't you looking for the people who came down to Liverpool with knives? Why aren't you looking for the people who'd slashed the man who was in your police custody? It seemed, from the community point of view, that the police investigation was one-sided.
Stephen Nichols was released that night and is now back on Granby Street. No charge has been preferred against him. That incident prepared the ground for October the 1st. 4 different black youths from Toxteth, who'd also been at the carnival, were appearing in court charged with causing an affray. Once again, there were allegations of injustice and rumours that the men would not be granted bail. Too many people from Liverpool 8 turned up and demanded to be let into court to see fair play.
Now, there's no need for a rush or a stampede. Take it easy.
Take it easy. Mind this far. Scenes like this were repeated inside the court building, and police and supporters of the defendants almost came to blows. But it was after the hearing, when the men were not granted bail, that the riot seemed inevitable. These officers from the Operational Support Division, who'd been on duty outside the court, were later that night to be at the centre of a controversy over police tactics. The trouble in Liverpool 8 started about 5:30.
Private motorists were stopped by gangs of youth and in some cases pulled from their car. That is something that nobody, incidentally, in the community condones or justifies. The police responded to that. But what seemed to happen after that, and I don't think anybody is saying the police shouldn't have responded to that, but what seemed to happen subsequent to that is that, unfortunately, the Operational Support Division, the OSD, moved into the area and moved in onto Granby Street and began to use the tactic of driving vehicles, Land Rovers and transit vans, very fast up and down Granby Street, on the pavements as well, with the intention of clearing any groups that happened to be there.
From the police tactics that were used last night, I honestly believe, as do a lot of other people, they intended to kill people last night. I was terrified, not just for me, but for other people. And I just can't, you know, we live with this. We live with these people. And they're supposed to be there to protect and uphold the rule of law and order. And we take crap day after day from these people.
Give us a delivery. Tell them all.
That night, the police vehicles were sweeping down Granby Street in this direction, some of them mounting the pavements. And standing just here were a group of people, including the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Liverpool, Derek Warlock. He had to force himself against this wall, and the wing mirror of a police Land Rover missed him by literally that much. Now he says that he feels it would be improper of him to discuss that incident. You know that the Archbishop now doesn't wish to discuss that incident at all. I mean, how do you feel about that since you were on the spot?
I feel very let down. Not just myself, a lot of people in the community feel very let down, because you have local priests who, as far as we are concerned, give total commitment to that community. They're prepared to go out on a limb, you know, to save people in situations such as that. Now, here you have the head of the church in Liverpool, the Catholic Church, who was in a position to make known to people that the police were carrying on in this fashion, you know, intimidating and bullying, aggression for no reason whatsoever. He could have made this public. He could have given credence to the stories that people tell and everybody disbelieves.
I think he sees himself as a conciliator and faces the fact that he's got to deal with the police in the future and doesn't want to get involved in the controversy.
Everybody, I mean, is in a similar position. Because you have an altercation with the police one day, it doesn't mean that in a future date you do not have to go to see them and speak to them. I mean, at present, I feel very bitter about what happened on those particular occasions. But possibly in the future, I may well sit round at a table with police officers and discuss other matters.
Maisie Uda was on her way home on the night of the riot. When she was near her own house in a side street off Granby Street, she saw about 12 officers jump out of an OSD vehicle. Now she's been asked to go to the law centre to give her version of events to officials who are trying to build up a dossier of exactly what happened that night.
Everything was all right, the kids was playing there, and the next thing I knew was I turned around and police had got out of a van. They were just walking up, banging the sticks, all of them, you know, on the shields.
So they were banging their sticks on the shields?
Well, I started to walk away towards my own house, and then they sort of started up in a frenzy. I call it the mad movies. And they started to sort of scream. They were shouting, "Come on, you black bastards." which I was disgusted about.
As to that night, although you weren't here, we're told that a lot of people were disturbed because the police conduct was heavy-handed with vehicles mounting the pavement and so on. Do you have a view about that?
Yes, I have a particular view about that. I'd made it quite clear, and we must go back about 6 or 8 weeks because of situations that were presenting themselves in Toxteth where people were wanting to indulge in criminal enterprises, and some of my chaps and girls were being put at risk. And there was some concern within the Federation, within the Police Federation. And I made it quite clear that whilst I had no intention of changing our community policing problems in inverts, that if people were hell-bent in committing criminal offences and in indulging in antisocial behaviour, there'd need to be positive policing, and that we would deal with it within the law. And certainly in the light of our experiences of 4 years ago, we learned very quickly there that static siege mentality type of policing wasn't going to be very successful, and mobility had got to be the key. So in essence, what took place on October 1 was within the purview or within the parameters of my policy in dealing with that type of street disorder.
So there are reports, particularly of the OSD, allegedly shouting racist slogans and banging their shields and things like that.
Well, that may be. I don't know. I can neither deny or agree that it was so. And in those situations, certainly when you're dealing with ethnic groupings, that sort of recollection is always brought forward.
The next day, the community police had the unenviable job of coming back on the beat here in Granby Street. And that day we saw the whole of an incident which sums up the gulf between police and black youths. An officer was standing about here, arguing with a black lad, who eventually spat on the officer, hitting him about here. The policeman lost his temper and chased him off in that direction. Meanwhile, another officer came across here and either tripped himself or was tripped until he finished up on the floor here in the middle of the road. Within seconds, about 3 or 4 black lads put the boot in from every direction, breaking his jaw. Seconds after that, a police transit came up here, out-jumped 3 or 4 officers, and 1 black youth disappeared under a hail of police fists and truncheons and shields. Now, if you ask the police about that incident today, all they can remember is that one of their lads got a broken jaw. If you ask the black youths, all they can remember is that one of them got beaten up by the police. There's no common ground. Now the community police set off on the beat, not knowing what to expect. Some of the more mature officers seem disheartened that years of painstaking work may have been ruined by a few hours' violence.
Being there, presumably, either in this building here or the next door.
Policemen and women don't volunteer to come to Toxteth anymore. Apart from the personal risk, most officers calculate that the strain on their families is too great. The community police now have a new difficulty. In the mythology which tends to spring up around a riot, it's claimed that they helped the OSD to carry out their firm tactics.
I also observed when the police were doing what they were doing here, community policemen in riot gear showing the special operations police where to go, how to reach places and who to attack. And then the next day you'd see them walking on Granby Street with their helmets, the chin straps on, and some of them walking with the batons out. These were the same arseholes that a couple of days ago was stroking our children's head, you know, saying, all right, kid, that was your dad, you know, and passing the ball. And now here they are, standing there, truncheons out, looking to beat anybody they can see. And then in a week's time, they'll take all this off and they'll be walking down the street saying, hello, how are you? Let's not be two-faced. If we're going to be critical about each other, let's be bloody critical about each other. But let's not be two-faced, because I won't be. I'll tell you straight, you're a bastard. And I have told them straight.
Do you say then that this thing called community policing has never worked?
I say community policing was twofold. It was, after 81, the police had realised the vulnerability because they travelled around in closed vehicles for so long. They were totally out of touch with the community. They didn't know people's names. They didn't know the area so well. That's how they got such a good hiding in 81. And I believe community policing, because if you look at all the proposals that Scarman had proposed, the one thing that was enforced very, very rigorously was community policing. Now, it was twofold for this. One, to get to know the community, get to know the layout of it, get to know the people, get to know the different factions and what have you. But also, I believe there's a big drawing board somewhere down in HQ with individuals' names, where they live, who they go to, who their friends are, what the registration number of all these vehicles are. I believe community policing is a massive observation of this community.
We don't believe that we've done anything wrong. We believe we've carried out Scarman to the ultimate. And if we're now going to look at what's happened over the recent past, we don't think you should be looking at the police force. You should be looking at the other factors. Because as far as we're concerned, and especially in Merseyside, we have carried out Scarman's recommendations to the hilt. And we believe that the trouble that's happening now is not the responsibility of the police force.
The ordinary people of Granby Street complain that they're never given credit for being considerate and thoughtful. Liverpool, they say, is in the news daily because of the rates crisis or militant tendency, but the publicity is never about their problems. When Liverpool's domestic political problems have been solved and forgotten, those of Toxteth will remain.
Mayday, mayday, the ship is sinking. Mayday, mayday, the pound is shrinking. Maggie's grinning, who's she kidding? Check it out, the ship is sinking. Now you reap what you sow, slave masters of my people, long ago. Now you reap what you sow, it's divine retribution, don't you know? I'm not laughing and I'm not stealing, I'm on your ship. That's why I'm fearing. Mayday, mayday, the ship is sinking. All hands on deck, all hands on deck. Your ship is sinking.
If you have people with profound sense of injustice for economic, social, whatever reasons, and you send in the police to keep the lid on it without relieving the tension, then you are on the road to violence. And that's the pattern in Ulster, and the more the police are sent in, and I use it deliberately, they don't choose to go, they are sent in to sit on the lid of the dustbin. If the dustbin is blazing furiously, the only response is catastrophe. And therefore, logically, I see us on the way to Ulster.
I think violence is going to be on the increase anyway because of the economic crisis in this city, and more businesses pull out of this city. You're eventually going to get territorial gangs, i.e. because of no employment, because there's nothing else to do. People are going to start claiming, well, this is my turf, and that's my turf, just like they have in the States. And you're going to actually have gangs controlling sections of territory, like Toxteth will be owned by one gang, Toxteth by another gang. You can see it's coming. And the politicians are totally turning a blind eye to reality. They're safe, you know, I mean, they go home to lovely houses, you know, nice suits. They spend £25, £30 on a meal. Man, here, people are living on that for a week. And then you see these assholes on the television telling us how prosperous society is becoming. Their society, not ours.
You asked me why there are riots. People don't tend to riot, I think, if they've got a lot of investment in the social system. You don't riot. I don't riot. We've got too much to lose. But the youngsters who are involved in riots, right, have nothing to lose, not even a future.